July 20th, 2025, 12:54 p.m. What if we told you that approximately 40 minutes after this exact moment, a Himars battery and an S-400 would come face to face? And what if we told you that the S-400 was heading toward Ukrainian border towns? It's not hard to guess what the Himars could do. The coordinates of both rival systems are also quite critical. The S-400 is stuck in a secret location between Belgorod and Kursk. The Himars, which is targeting it and preparing for surprise attacks, is in Kharkiv. Once all preparations, coordinates, and plans were finalized, it was time to monitor air traffic. In other words, the S-400s had to be detected, and the Himars had to be deployed to the area immediately to begin operations. Air reconnaissance traffic over Ukraine's northern front was heavier than usual. One of the small tactical drone teams west of Kharkiv detected unusual electromagnetic noise on the other side of the Seversky-Donetsk line. According to band scanning analysis, the signal belonged to the 92 N6E multifunction radar of the Russian S-400 Triumf system. The frequency pattern indicated a high-power narrow-beam scanning mode, meaning the antenna was not in standby mode, but preparing for actual firing. The same signal also produced a weak echo in the direction of the village of Teplo, 40 kilometers to the south. Half of the dual-site battery was stationed in the Kolodnoy fields near Belgorod, while the other half was on duty near Kursk. Satellite-based intelligence networks confirmed the image. 2 BAZ tow trucks, a 92 N6E track-and-shoot radar on an MZKT-7930, and a 50-meter-long 91 N6E Big Bird long-range search antenna were all aligned in open terrain. No Z-10 or Panzer close protection vehicles were visible on the ground. Only the anti-aircraft backbone was relied upon. The S-400 was an open target. The radar direction and time parameters reinforced the possibility that Russia was planning to open a cruise missile salvo window along the Kharkiv-Poltava axis in the afternoon, following the Shahed and Lancet attacks. In other words, while preparing the S-400, the Russians were also planning an airstrike against Ukraine. 35 minutes after receiving this data, the Ukrainian Ground Forces Artillery Intelligence Unit activated the M142 Himars fire unit. So it was probably around 1:30 p.m. at that time. The selected ramp was the only truck stationed at an abandoned silo complex with an asphalt strip in the rural area of Balaklia district, Kharkiv. All 6 pods on the load were filled with GMLRS M31A2 ammunition. The M31A2 is a 90-kilogram class unitary steel-bodied rocket with a nose-approach fuse and delayed detonation. Its range is 84 kilometers, with a circular error probability of 3 to 4 meters. The GPS-INS guidance package had been updated to R9 mode, meaning it could tolerate initial deviation using inertial measurement even if Russian GLONASS jamming was active. Radar coordinates were loaded into the ramp's autonomous fire control computer at the meter level because the satellite laser rangefinder had marked the 92 N6E's platform rails at a specific degree north and east. This point was exactly 76 kilometers away from the Himars, and the rocket's flight time would not exceed 150 seconds. The biggest advantage of the Himars truck is that its fire and escape cycle is less than 5 minutes. The truck resembles an ordinary 5-axle tactical transporter seen on the market. Only the wire-covered GPS dome on top of the cabin, the white antenna at the rear of the roof, and the 6-eyed pod provide clues to the careful observer. The 305-horsepower Caterpillar diesel engine can propel the truck at speeds of up to 90 kilometers per hour, and it can be made ready to fire even at a 6-degree side slope in rough terrain. The fire control officer, confident in these capabilities, maneuvered the ramp out of the silo courtyard at exactly 1:35 p.m., parked it 700 meters behind the forest cover on a dirt segment, and deployed the hydraulic legs. In case of a Lancet attack, a mobile jammer pickup connected to a Starlink terminal was deployed 300 meters behind the truck. If the Russian FPV swarm launched an intuitive attack, the UHF band would be jammed, gaining 40 seconds after firing. At the top of the target list was the 92 N6E multi-purpose radar, followed by the 91 N6E search radar. The first rocket was assigned to the radar container, the second to the Big Bird antenna cage, with the remaining 4 GMLRS in the pod as emergency reserves. The rocket switched to single-shot mode, and the timer was set to 6 seconds. This tactic was designed to measure the personnel's escape reflex after the first explosion and reduce the likelihood of new personnel entering under the antenna head. The electronic trigger button of the M142 was pressed. The first M31A2 rocket launched from the pod with an initial acceleration of 87 g, its engine burning for only 1.5 seconds, with the remainder of the flight planned using a ballistic, semi-ballistic trajectory. The GPS signal kept the rocket on course, and meteorological corrections were loaded from the pod computer at launch. The rocket's burnout altitude was 11 kilometers, where it reached a speed of Mach 2.6. In the second phase of the flight, the rocket transmitted its nose radar coordinates to the ground, and its speed dropped to Mach 2.0 in passive flight. The terminal phase began with a 1.2-gram turn. The angle was fixed at 43 degrees, and the approach flare was activated 900 meters above the ground. When the rocket was 50 meters above the radar cabin, its seeker became inoperable due to GPS interference, at which point the INS took over. Even a 3 milligrade error would not have caused the steel body to deviate from the target. The nose of the Himars rocket struck the lower plate of the rotating mechanism of the S-400 Air Defense System's 92N6E. The delayed fuse ignited 12 milliseconds later, generating a 97 megapascal shockwave that shattered the cabin. The radar's cage antenna collapsed to the ground within seconds, and the tetrode amplifiers in the injection cabin caught fire. Field sentries who recorded the first explosion as a visual alarm attempted to notify the higher command chain within 34 seconds. However, the fiber cable of the field telephones had been severed by the rocket impact. The radio frequency backup channel was unable to connect directly to the network because it was packetizing through the Big Bird antenna. Amidst this chaos, the second GMLRS rocket entered its approach phase. This time, the target was the right main support leg of the Big Bird antenna. The rocket detonated before the 91N6E antenna operator could switch the crane arm to passive protection mode, and the massive panel collapsed sideways with a weight of 25 tons. The dust mushroom created by the second impact over the green field could be seen with the naked eye along the silver field line. The explosion timeline lasted only a minute and a half. As the Himars officer shut down the fire control box, he gave the move command to the ramp motor. The truck retracted its hydraulic legs and fled into the forest, and the operator reported to command that the mission was complete without expending the 4 rockets remaining in the pod. 5.5 minutes later, perhaps as a Russian Orlan fixed-wing reconnaissance aircraft approached the area, the ramp's heat signature had already disappeared below tree level. The time of the Himars' disappearance remains an unsolved problem for every Russian counter-battery algorithm. Once the ramp escaped from the firing compartment in 5 minutes, calling for KAB-250, or Iskander on the other side became a nearly meaningless delay. Once the S-400 battery, now without radar, got over the initial shock, it decided to launch the launchers on the tow vehicles. However, S-400 systems cannot generate firing solutions on their own. They require tracking and encryption data from another battery. The nearest operational radar in the area was 58 kilometers north near Fatej. Without a fiber or microwave link, it was impossible to enter the firing cycle. Therefore, the launchers were left idle and hidden under camouflage nets. The Air Defense Brigade's electronic warfare unit quickly decided to bring Pantsir S-2s to the scene. However, since it would take 4 to 5 hours to reach the area, the Russian cruise missile wave expected in the afternoon was postponed. Ukrainian frontline intelligence did not detect any cruise missiles or Shaheds in the Kharkiv airspace until after 5 p.m., confirming that the decision had been definitively postponed. A report on the cost of the mission was prepared on the Ukrainian side. M31. A2 rockets cost $170,000 each. 2 rockets cost $340,000. The M142 launcher's anti-aircraft jammer and fuel logistics component cost $60,000, for a total of $400,000. On the Russian side, the S-400's radar body, antenna, chassis cabin, power unit, electronic modules, and irreparable spare parts cost between $30 and $35 million. No personnel losses were reported, as they were off-duty in the cabin. Nevertheless, the radar malfunction was a severe blow to morale. The expenditure-damage ratio was once again at a 100-fold level. The real cost, however, is measured by the missile delay caused by the shield gap, which will give the Ukrainian front a new window for its own unmanned attacks when the tactical air corridor opens. Artillery counter-battery radars can reach much further when the S-400 shield is down. The technical picture has also become clear. The M31A2's GPS-INS hybrid proved its accuracy under Russian jamming. The Triumph radar's large cross-section provided excellent contrast for the GMLRS warhead. The Himars battery reduced guidance error to less than 3 meters by entering meteorological parameters and magnetic deviation before firing. Additionally, the thin sheet metal of the 92N6E cabin could not withstand the steel hull resembling the BLU-97, and when the delayed fuse penetrated the mechanism, the most expensive component was struck at its core. The strategic outcome of the operation is Russia's necessity to rebalance its high-altitude defense shield along the Belgorod-Kursk line. The S-400's radars are as sturdy and expensive as a fortress, but since they are mobile on trucks, they lack fixed concrete shelters. The fact that the target was hit within 2 minutes of being spotted left Russian commanders with the question of whether to pull back 40 kilometers or deploy a double radar array. Whichever option they choose, the cost will increase, the firing corridor will narrow, or the defense gap will widen. For Ukraine, the gains are twofold. First, it proves that even a platform with limited numbers and relatively short range, such as Himars, can strike at the heart of Russia's deep defense with the right guidance. Second, it shows that this can be continued with the still unsaturated stock of GMLRS, providing a psychological argument to the Western supply chain. Every result obtained legitimizes a new rocket package. Moreover, since the battery suffered the loss of twin radars, the second and third firing opportunities will continue until a backup radar arrives in the same area. Following this critical attack pitting the S-400 air defense system against the Himars missile system, the smoke over the Kolodnoye field did not dissipate until evening. The flames gave way to the smell of vaporized diesel fuel. The scorched metal plates scattered across the dirt road in Tepel were being collected with cranes, but it was impossible to find the antenna cage in one piece. When the sun set, the air raid sirens did not sound in the cities of Kharkiv and Bohodukov, and people experienced their first uninterrupted clear night in 8 weeks. The reason, of course, was that Himars GMLRS rockets had rendered the S-400s inoperable. Sometimes a salvo of 2 GMLRS rockets leaves a more visible mark than a missile production line capable of producing hundreds of tons of missiles. In the War of the Ages, the mathematics of cheap rockets is changing the game of shield and spear. Every time the Himars truck pulls the trigger, radars worth hundreds of millions of dollars remember that they are as fragile as a piece of steel. Thank you for watching. June 5, 2025, 11:30 a.m. 3 Iskander M launchers in the Klintsy rural area of Bryansk Oblast began moving their rocket bodies into preparation positions. The planned launch window for the Iskander missiles targeted Ukrainian border cities, including Sumy. However, the Russians were unaware of what was about to unfold. 45 kilometers south, along the Ukrainian border, a Himars M142 vehicle was locked onto the Iskander M system. We are referring to the Himars, a high-mobility multiple rocket launcher capable of carrying 6 rockets. The Himars launcher receives 3 command inputs for a rocket salvo. The digital attack package is wirelessly transmitted to the launcher. In this operation, the launchers were positioned 5 to 7 kilometers inside the borderline. The firing angles were calculated at 45 degrees. Thus, the rockets would strike the same target area in an elliptical pattern. To counter the possibility of jamming, the rockets updated their INS data at a rate of 10 Hz. If GPS is lost, the inertial guidance system remains active until the rocket engine shuts down, after which the flight computer applies a correction curve based on the last known error. To ensure the successful strike of the 3 Iskander M systems, 2 Leleka 100 surveillance drones operating at an altitude of 12,000 meters accompanied the Himars launcher, providing a line of sight to the Rampalar N and Rampalar S designated areas. Drone 1 detected the container array in optical mode, while Drone 2 identified the generator output in thermal mode. The passive RF sensor chain deployed along the border had already detected the short-period FSK data used by the Iskander launcher's command network. This data was transmitted to the Himars launcher. The images were shared with the Himars fire control tablet via a Starlink Vi-3 terminal for the area without a terrestrial fiber line. Thus, the actual ramp crew received the target coordinates directly on the M142 computer. In other words, 3 Iskander M missiles were being tracked. The reason for such intensive preparations is that the targets are of high value. When the Iskander M capability was activated, it could strike any warehouse, bridge, or command center up to 400 kilometers deep with its half-ton warhead. Moreover, its hypersonic speed and terminal maneuverability allowed it to deceive most air defense batteries. For this reason, the launchers had been at the top of Kiev's intelligence list for weeks. Without their elimination, facilities around Sumy, Chernihiv, and even Kiev could not be considered fully secure. At 11:45, the Himars launcher locked onto 3 Iskander M systems, based on data from drones, and the operation began. Russian forces, unaware of all this, had moved the Iskander launchers to a concrete open area resembling an open-air hangar, surrounding it with tent-like containers, maintenance trailers, and short-range defense guns. The launch took place within the Himars range, but there were some complications during the operation. Bryansk, along with other border cities like Belgorod and Kursk, was directly within the range of Russian air defense and radar early warning systems. The Himars launcher remaining stationary for over 5 minutes increased the risk of counter-artillery or unmanned aerial attacks. Planners therefore decided to strictly enforce the fire once, move out rule. The Himars launcher would move into 3 separate pre-designated positions, fire its 6 rocket payloads simultaneously, then immediately exit the asphalt and retreat to the rear. Empty rocket casings would be replaced with new ammunition before dawn, and the same scenario would be repeated over the following days. The choice of midday for the attack was no coincidence. The Iskander M launchers, located within the full range of the Himars missile system, 45 kilometers away, were practically open targets during the daytime while preparing for the attack. This is precisely the biological weakness that Ukrainian military planners sought to exploit. Additionally, the light breeze of the summer night created low-level thermal interference, enhancing temperature contrast on drone cameras, while radar frequencies operated more reliably due to low humidity. In short, the region was ideal for both optical and electronic intelligence in the summer heat. The first sign triggering the activation process appeared on the passive listening antenna of the BRDM-2 reconnaissance vehicle along the border. The radio sensor mounted on the vehicle's body had intercepted short-period data packets emanating from the Iskander camp in the forest. These packets were routine test messages exchanged between the launcher control computers and did not interfere with any other systems in terms of frequency or duration. This meant that the launchers were active at that moment and were likely preparing for rocket launch. Perhaps the Iskander M systems were about to level 3 different cities in Ukraine. Until confirmation arrived, Ukraine's Himars launcher remained silent in a secluded thicket, waiting under its camouflage net. As soon as the BRDM reached sea level, the code word was transmitted to the situation room. The hive is full. As soon as the signal was given, the screen in front of the drone operator went dark, and a thermal map resembling a delta wing appeared. The crosshair was pointing directly at the center of the camp. When the GPS coordinates were entered into the attack computer, the Himars launcher activated with icy discipline. The launcher would remain concealed, preventing Russian counter-battery fire from hitting it with a single salvo. According to Ukrainian commanders, the plan was seamless, but it was impossible to remain calm without hearing the thunderous roar of the missiles lifting off their launchers. Everyone was likely thinking about the sudden bright line that could come from a Russian Pantsir or Buk battery. The Himars launcher retracted its automatic loading hook, with 6 GMLRS missiles lined up in front of the rail, and the digital guidance update was complete.